So welcome back, everybody. Thanks so much for showing up on time so we can begin promptly here. We're going to start this session with some introductions. And I guess before we dive into that, just calling out. So we are beginning our first session in the systems building track. So last week we met with Karen and Leah and worked on skills building. That's within the conflict resolution framework. That's learning to be better people in tense situations, right? The nonviolent communication, the active listening, reflecting, connection before correction. So our theory of change is that there's work we can do as individual people, right, to just handle conflicts better or anticipate them and put out fires before they get too big. And on the flip side, there's things we can do for our market. So that's what the systems building track is about. And that's what we're kicking off today. So there's new faces in the room for our education team. So you've got me and Andrew here again, who I think we don't need an introduction at this point, but I will give a little space for just Hannah, Dar, and Leslie to just say hello and introduce themselves. So Hannah, why don't you go first?
Sure. Hi, I am Hannah. I own Cornerstone Farm in Palmyra and have been producing vegetables and pork we have like 5 acres of veggies and 8 hoop houses, and we've been raising 200 head of hog to butcher each year. We farrow to finish. We sell 100% of our stuff at farmers markets and always have through our entire farming career. So during that time, I've been a part of many, I think upwards of 12 markets throughout the state of Maine, and organized many of them working as director, whatever, either director, chairman, whatever you want to call it, of the organization. And also working through developing MFFM and helping that get back on its feet again some years ago. So hopefully we have interesting things to talk about today.
Thanks, Hannah. Dar, you want to say hi?
Yeah, sure. I'm Dar Walnick. I am a staff member at the National Farmers Market Organization, Farmers Market Coalition, which was founded about 17 years ago by farmers market leaders around the country to build some capacity around connecting to the USDA and state agriculture leaders and helping state associations with their capacity. And at that time, I was actually running markets in New Orleans I was the deputy director of what is known as Market Umbrella, which is the New Orleans-based farmers market organization. And transitioned to being a consultant for farmers markets about 10, 12 years into that. Consulted for markets all over the country, including in your neck of the woods, folks. And then joined FMC as a staff member in 2015. And so my essential job is to understand the needs, the trends, the challenges, the successes of farmers market operators around the country, and to support them to find places we can add a resource or provide some support, or to assist our state leaders like Jimmy and Andrew in what they're doing with helping you build your capacity. So it's a constant scanning of what's happening around the country and now even around the world, because now we have a World Farmers Market Coalition that FMC is a member of, and we're learning from countries all over the globe about how they're running farmers markets as well. And so it's been about 25 years for me in this work, and I expect to do it pretty much for the rest of my life. And so I'm here to just provide that sort of high level, that 30,000 foot level of what we see around the country, and bring resources back to you and support the leaders here. So glad to be here. And I live in New Orleans still.
Thanks, Dar. Leslie, do you want to say hi?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Leslie Forstat. I work for the University of Maine Cooperative Extension, use she, her pronouns. And my job, I work pretty closely with Karen and with Leah sometimes as well. So they're, your other training team. and come to bring this structural stuff, working with Dar and Hannah in these sessions, to really just kind of be here to help facilitate and add additional questions and be here as a resource. So I am with Cooperative Extension. My role is called Human Development Specialist. So I think a lot about the people that farm, and I've been with Extension since, I guess it's going on 17 years. So long time. Happy to be here.
Cool. Awesome. And just one other thing before we dive into today's content, just a quick pause and reflection on the community agreements or guidelines for us all to be abiding by and honoring. I know Karen and Leah added a few last week, expect non-closure being one, which is just a common thing that we have to, tough pill to swallow sometimes in the world of conflict in life. And yeah, does anybody else feel free to use the chat or just unmute yourself if you want to add anything here. Pause for a second. Okay. I'm going to stop my share screen. In a moment, I will stop my share screen. I'm using two computers and that gets confusing, doesn't it? Let me see here. Why am I having a hard time stopping my share screen? Well, anyways, while I figure that out, sorry, everybody. I think I will pass. Well, I guess just a few things, just in general, like the baseline, how this works, right? We want you all to be unmuting yourself and chiming in whenever you'd like. This is supposed to be iterative work. We expect your participation in this as the community agreements outline. And yeah, just we would love for you to be with your camera on if possible, if you're comfortable with that. I know some people are under the weather today. It's totally fine to not be. But yeah, we feel free to use the chat. We got a lot of good activity there last time. And yeah, I will pass it on to Hannah. And Hannah, if you'll just be patient, you go ahead and take it over, but I'm going to just figure out why I can't stop my share screen.
That sounds great. Thank you, Jimmy. So I'm gonna just start off with a little bit of what Jimmy just said, but feel free if interrupting me is completely fine, 100% fine. If you feel uncomfortable doing that, please, you can raise your hand, which is down in the reactions part of a Zoom. You can also physically raise your hand, and Jimmy and Andrew are gonna be keeping an eye for that, or you can just start talking. There's also the chat, which I believe Jimmy and Andrew will be, oh, he stopped sharing screen and my face is right up in there. Sorry, guys. So he'll be sharing the chat. If you want to add things in there, I think Jimmy and Andrew will also be keeping an eye there. So there's lots of ways for you to participate in the conversation. I am sharing my screen in my kitchen and to be very human about it. So if you guys are sitting in your kitchen, it's totally fine. No one's going to look in the background and judge how clean your kitchen is, hopefully. And my example here in case you need one. Okay, so talking today, last time you guys really talked a lot about conflict and kind of the ins and outs of it. And I think that's going to be developing more in future sessions. But one of the things we wanted to check in on is kind of front loading our system so we can avoid as much conflict as possible. And some of the four major things I think about in creating a structure to avoid conflict are not the nitty gritty of it, though the nitty gritty of course is important, but it is going to also vary dramatically between all of our markets. So kind of some of the overarching things to think about are, is our structure transparent? Can people go and find out about your structure? Can somebody who maybe is not feeling very empowered go and find out how the structure works? So websites are a great place for that, but there's plenty of other ways to make those transparent. Another one is expectations. I would love for the expectations to be clear. People who don't know what's going on are more likely to be confused, more likely to be grumpy, more likely to be caught off guard. Those are all things that are going to trigger some more conflict. So expectations being clear. If I know this is going to happen and I don't like it and it happens, I'm going to be less surprised than if I had no idea it was going to happen. And then agency is also one of those crucial things for all living things. But having some choice. So the players have a choice in and a voice in the process of creating the structure. In our cooperative markets, that's a fairly kind of inherent to the cooperation idea. But are we sure that's happening? And how can we make sure that's happening? And then the last, also kind of really connected to that, is inclusivity. So even those new farmers who are coming in, or new vendors who are coming in, do they feel like they're part of the club? Do our customers feel like they're part of the club? Or is there like cliques? Like, are there people who feel like they're excluded from the cool kid clique? And really making a little extra effort to make sure people feel included in the team can really decrease some of the conflict later on. So today we're going to be working on reviewing what you all currently have in place for structure, and looking at specifically the market day today. So we're going to take a moment to think about what we have in place, and is it organized? Do we need to change things? Do we need to add? Can we improve? We almost always can, regardless of what the situation is. And for full disclosure, right now I'm part of the Bangor and the Portland farmers markets, and have been very involved in the Orono, Booth Bay, Waterville farmers markets in the past. And I will say, in reviewing all of our rules and bylaws, in thinking about this, all of those have room for lots of improvement. So it's an active, ongoing situation for all markets, I think. And even if you get a handle on it, you get it really dialed in, then it may need to morph, right? That's this kind of a living organism in itself. So today we're going to break the first session down. We have two charts for you. One is an organizational chart, which Dar is going to kind of go over with us. And then we have a who does what and where and when chart that I will go over with you. So I'm going to hand it over to Dar.
You want me to share screen? Dar, you're muted, and I'll share the screen so we can be looking at these while you're talking about them.
Yeah, that is great. Thank you. That was really a great framing. I think, where am I at? I can't see myself. Not sure where I went. Where am I? That is weird.
A bunch of balloons right now.
Oh no, yeah, that's weird. Where did I go? I'm trying to get that. I'm trying to do it again. No, I'm not there for some reason. Oh, weird. Let me try to move my background. So we're having all kinds of technology issues today. What is this about? At least I do know. Nope, that's not going to work. Nope. Well, I don't know where I am. I swear to God, I'm here. I don't know if you can see me, but I can't see me. It's very strange.
We'll stick with the balloons.
Yeah, that's a market in Italy. So in case people want to know. Yeah, so the idea we're going to talk about is organizational chart. This is not as important as the next step we're going to talk about, which is market day responsibilities and roles. But obviously, in the ways that Hannah was talking about, in terms of being transparent and cooperative and inclusive and having agency and agreement, you need to know who's who. And so when we ask markets, we just want to make sure that there's some sort of a visual or a linear list of everybody who's involved, both on market day and before market day, in decision-making and in the process, so that you can orient a new vendor or a volunteer to who's who, that board members understand what their role might be, and even to take the chart and to put it in the hierarchy that it is in terms of decision-making, or when it just, what's the process for this, who gets first choice of decision and then who goes after that, and so on and so on. So yeah, the idea of creating an organizational chart, we've created templates for each of you to be able to do that. We'll have breakouts in a bit, but it's not meant to be exhaustive. It's just meant to make sure that you're aware and everybody else is aware, all the entity people that are involved in helping to build Market Day and the market process. So that's pretty much what we hope from that. We don't want it to get too complicated, but it really does help to have this written out. And obviously it helps really to have it as a visual. Hannah, you going to talk about Market Day?
You bet. You
All
bet I
right.
will. All right. So let's see. Jimmy has shared on his screen there the market days and responsibilities. So this goes back a little bit into whether your farmers market is completely a cooperative model or not. I know most in the state of Maine are, but not all. And I'm not sure about the models in Vermont, but this is a moment for inclusivity, right? Yes, there are tasks to be done, and not everybody is set out to be the treasurer of the farmers market, and not everybody is set up to want to be a volunteer manager. And so there are things, right, where you can find cones. Who's putting out the cones, right? And the key about some of these jobs and responsibilities that I felt was to be sure that people understood that they were important. And it is important to not create jobs that are fillers, that aren't really important, and then make farmers do them, because that's a drag, and farmers are smart. And so they're going to figure that out right away. So what are the tasks? And in this, there are some common ones. I think Jimmy has created a bit down the bottom. You can see at the bottom here, every one of you has one of these assigned to you. So we're going to be breaking out into groups, and you get to change them, right? For like, maybe you don't have an information booth, or maybe you don't need cones, right? So what are the common tasks? Setting up, taking down, what are things that need to be done, and who's doing it? And so obviously they have here who's doing it on the books and who's actually doing it. Let's make those match, right? Like, that's expectations. Let's clear that up. So we can start with this of on the books and actual, and then try to think of some ways to create those to be the same. And so some of the things to think about with what these jobs are how many vendors we have, right? Large markets are going to have inherently more things, more tasks that need to be done, probably. And also love to think about a little bit of systems when that vendor is gone, right? Like, okay, if your apple farmer is the one who's putting the cones out and they're only there from August through November, who the heck's putting the cones out in May, and whose responsibility is for that swap over to happen? Things like that are really helpful to front load, have in place. Who's overseeing it? And then how are we doing the swap around if someone is sick and not coming, it's raining, and it's a soap maker who is doing the thing? You know, let's really dig into that all a little bit. Also in that, we want to think about what's the capacity of the market. So if you have a very small market, we want to avoid one person doing all of it. We want to think about the cooperative nature, the inclusivity, but also this is a little bit of decision making, right? If we don't have the capacity to do all these things, it's not for one person to say, I'm going to do it all. I'm just going to do it all with zero compensation and just for the overall good. Like, the overall good is a cooperative thing. So if there aren't enough people to do those jobs, then you need to start thinking about, are those jobs critical? What are the most critical jobs, and narrowing that down. And I think that is actually a really critical part of this market day roles and responsibilities. If we want to expand this, if we want to have live music, who's the one who's willing to take on that live music? Maybe it's a volunteer, maybe it's a paid staff person, maybe it's one of your vendors, but thinking about them and the management of them too, right? So that goes back to Dara's chart of kind of what's the trickle down effect. And the more we can work that out ahead of time, the clearer things are going to be the day of, and the more smoothly things are going to run. So we're going to we're going to do breakout groups into that, and work on those 2 sheets in your market groups. Before we do that, I did want to check in about what about the conflict, right? How does conflict work into this? And so one of the things about market day is, how are we handling conflict on that market day? And one of the things that, or not one of the things, the thing that we want to really think about is, how do we get the rules to minimize this? When there is conflict, one of the really important rules I go to is how to change rules. So making sure you have that front loaded is really helpful. So here you are, there's a conflict. If it comes down to as simple as, this is against the rules, then that's like, thank you. That's really helpful, because you can make it really clear. You can also take that moment to empower the people who don't like the rule. Okay, this is where this rule is made. This is how it was made, and this is how it can be changed. And this is the time in which it can be changed, right? Like right then on a Saturday morning at 5 o'clock in the morning, that is not the time that rules can be changed. But having a structure that you can point to, which is already transparent about how that rule can change, is super, super helpful. So you do need someone to be able to say that on that day, but you don't have to wiggle through that whole problem at 5 o'clock in the morning. It can definitely be noted and tabled, and empower that person to bring it forward, or ask for help bringing it forward, if that makes sense. So that's just one of the things I want to think about the capacity that we have as vendors or market leaders or market managers at the moment it happens is often much smaller than our capacity, say, right now in the winter or in January. We have a little more capacity. We can work through that. We can work through that cooperatively, or however our rules suggest. But let's think about that as we're looking at our market days and responsibilities. Dar, did you have anything you wanted to add to that before we talk about going to our breakout rooms?
No, I think that's great. I think we should let them go talk about it. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Okay, so Andrew is going to split up folks into their market groups, and all of the facilitators are going to be in and out of some rooms, just if there's questions, if there are things you want to discuss, but we're working on filling these out and customizing them to your markets. We're going to come back and kind of go over that together after you have a chance to kind of go through it. Does anybody have any questions about it before we go into breakout rooms? I, of course, cannot see anybody's hands, so I'm trying to figure out. Oh, yeah.
So my only issue is I cannot see the whole screen or chart.
Okay.
can
Let's see.
But I'm doing it on my phone.
Oh, yeah.
We can join you, Robert, and fill it in with you. One of us can join you in your room.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, as everyone should be having a little invite to go out to a room? It looks like people are leaving, so I am also going to go join a room. So this is a wonderful time to start breaking down. Is there someone who might be really good for this job? And we don't necessarily need to start the people in at like the biggest management job, right? Like, I'm not going to say, you've never done a thing for the market, could you please be the chairman of the market now? But I might say, like, hey, there's this thing that needs to be done like this. Is this something you feel like you could take on around that?
Mhm.
And at group meetings, I love these things of like, okay, do we want as a group to have, do we want to block that part off so cars aren't driving into the market? And then
Mhm.
everybody, like all the vendors, yeah, oh, yeah, just, geez, that old lady, she just about took out my apples. And geez, that guy who was a little drunk did this, you know. So they're all going to say that. And
Mhm.
then that's the perfect moment to say, cool, who's going to volunteer to do that?
Mhm.
Here's a
That's
moment.
such a great example, Anna, because the idea of like, okay, who wants to volunteer? Right? Like when it's just this like sort of
Mhm.
open-ended call, often elicits crickets. Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
But this
Mhm.
idea that, you know, but instead, like having it be at first this sort of more inclusive conversation where you're talking with everybody, and maybe that may be a culture change for your market, right? Like I don't know how many opportunities vendors
Mhm.
may have had to play additional roles for the
Mhm.
overall market in the past. So this might be new to start those conversations.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
a couple of years ago, when I was just I was previous to becoming the manager full time, I would be the fill-in, like in between, in between market managers, and was brought up at one of the meetings, at a board meeting by one of our other board members, and um, the 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 vendors at the time, a few of them actually said, "We pay our vendor fee. That's what you're getting out of us." You know, um, it was like, not a culture of, you know, like pitching in, and, there are a few people on our summer market that have said, "Hey, let me know where I can help." We don't have that as much in our winter market. We actually, not all of our vendors, we can only fit about 2/3 of our vendors in the winter as we can in the summer. So we have significantly less.
Yeah, and so that means that you guys have a little less capacity, and also because it's indoors, it does mean that there's a little bit more work to be done, right? All those vendors are lugging all their stuff in, which is a big pain in the butt.
Mhm.
Typically, they also start slightly later because we've all accommodated for travel and weather and all of those things. So but it's a great moment. There's that moment of crickets, right? That Leslie was talking about. One of the things that happens that I have seen and have done at markets is said like, okay, do we want this? If we want it, who is taking it on?
Okay.
Nobody
That's a
says
good
anything.
point.
Like if nobody's is saying anything at that point, right? Like I prefer the narrative, right? I like it to get the narrative in there. But if you get to the crickets, and you eventually will get to the crickets at some point, then the moment is, well, then do we really need it if no one's willing to do it?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
instead of, it's so tempting as the organizer to say, okay, no one will do it. I guess I'll do it, even though I have a bad back and those cones weigh 200 pounds. Like, I guess I'm going to be the one, right? No reason to throw yourself on that. Okay, I guess we aren't going to need cones. I hope no one's apples get run over, right? Like, what is this? And I try to, again, front load just the meeting with, here we are a cooperatively run thing. We have a whole bunch of tasks. You could just start out the meeting with, here's a piece of paper I'm sending around. Can everybody put their name on what task they'd like to do? The Bangor market has on their application. What task are you going to do? Right?
Okay.
Circle
That's a
one.
really good.
Please circle one, and so that will fill it up to begin with, to start, because people are going to say, thank you, Jimmy, very nice, right here. He has it down what it's, please
Oh,
let us
sweet.
do. It's under volunteer jobs. We have post road signs, update market calendars, take photos for social media, all those things. And again, if nobody circles, take photos for social media. Okay, maybe our market doesn't have capacity to have social media. That would be a shame, but it
Yeah.
isn't on the one organizer. It may be on you to point out that photos should be taken for social media. It isn't necessarily on you to have to take all of those photos, particularly if you're a volunteer. It's different if we have assigned somebody that job who are paying to do that job. That's a different situation. But anyway, That's, so I would love to hear from other folks as well. Like, what did other people find filling this out? Are they finding that the people who are on the books for doing different jobs were doing those jobs? Were they finding other people were? How did that work? What are people finding? Anybody else want to volunteer some information or discoveries from working through these sheets?
Well, I feel like there is a big difference between a market that has a volunteer manager and a paid manager, honestly. So as a paid manager, and they do pay me well, a lot of the market day tasks, I mean, there are a couple lifting things and other stuff that it's a 2-person job. And so I do get help, but a lot of it is mine, and that's what they pay me for.
Which
So
is fantastic, right? And sounds like you're doing it, which is even better. That's
I mean,
awesome.
if I have to take a day off, then I do round up volunteers for those tasks. That's usually once in a summer. Another market manager takes my place for the day, and I try to alleviate her of all those other tasks. So I find folks who will do all those little things, so she just can, zero in on the management. And it seems to be working.
Excellent. And do you feel like you have the support you need if things get kind of over your head and like, ooh, this is out of my pay grade? Do you have a system you can go to?
I feel like right now, Putney Farmers Market has a great board. We have a great board of directors, a 7-person board. Most of them are at every market, some are not, some are daily vendors. And they're really willing to help. Like, they're just right there to back me up. They're right there to carry things. They're right there to, they're just right now with the combination of folks we have, it is working very well. I think that's key, is that combination of people.
I love to hear it, and I love to hear that things are structurally in a good place for the Putney Farmers Market. That is awesome. Cool. Are there other folks? All right, Geneva, are you willing to share or would like to share? I saw it just pop up for a second there and then I lost it.
Yeah, that's fine. I just added into the chat. Everybody at our market that's down on the books to do something does it. We have a great group of volunteers that run our market, and we all work really well together. I'm very fortunate to be part of the market that I am. We're more like a family in a sense that if anybody needs anything, we all help each other out. We guide the new members in on how things go. One of the biggest confusion things with new vendors is how our credit card system and EBT system works. And I think pretty much any one of our market management position people, or even any of the other vendors, would be able to step in and help with that if needed.
Excellent. That's wonderful.
I wonder if I sat in on Manchester's conversation. Carrie, I don't know if you want to give, I don't want to put you on the spot, so you can pass if you want.
No, it's fine. We're in a really, really frustrating situation. We have 3 board members. That is it. And they have been on the board for as long as the market has pretty much been around. They're unwilling to do anything, unwilling to change anything, unwilling to communicate. Everything is put on me, but I'm not allowed to do anything. So it's a very frustrating situation. Like, I'm the one that does everything. And if I ask for help, it's not granted. Or I ask for help and it's not my place to ask for help. I asked for things to be changed, and it's not my place to ask for things to be changed. Every opportunity or idea I present to them is instantly shut down with a no. It's a very, like, I quit the market last year, and then my uncle, who is in here as well, dragged me back in because the market was falling apart. They had no manager last year. It's a very unhealthy, toxic situation. And the only way to really fix it is to get rid of the board members, but there's nobody to like overrule the board members when there's only 3 of them and 2 of them are the issue. So it's been an interesting, fun situation that we really don't know how to fix right now.
So one of the things that I think about is, are the board members active farmers in it? What is their stake in it?
Yes, they are active vendors. One of them and also runs all of the finances for the market. And, they are unwilling. They were actually invited to be on this and they refused. It's a straight up refusal to fix anything. It's a straight up refusal to have the conversations. Somebody offered mediation, and the problem with the mediation is they're unwilling to come to a mediation. They're unwilling to participate in any of that. So it's, the options are like the market fails, which is where it's going. And I've spent years trying to build it back up, especially after COVID, or there has to be a complete turnaround of everybody on there.
Well, it actually sounds like you have a pretty good handle on where you're at. I think I think you're coming to terms with some of you're right. There's no negotiation if part of the group is not willing to negotiate. I would love to hear Dar, if Dar has things to add there to give Carrie some energy in moving forward.
And I think the hard part too, just I want to add this in quickly, is my hands are tied as the manager. I'm not allowed to make any changes. I'm not allowed to say anything. I'm just supposed to show up and do my job. But I'm not allowed to do my job. So,
Yeah. I mean, that unfortunately it happens. It's a devolving and escalating situation that happens in markets. And obviously what many markets do is they create alternative structures, they go around, and none of that's going to solve the problem on long term. I think you're right. I don't obviously I would need to know more to really give really good ideas about what I've seen around the country, but there's no question that naming it and describing it and to keep describing it to the community is what's the first step of that. And I'm sure our mediation folk have some other thoughts about that as well.
And I plugged in the chat, but we do offer individual support to markets. I already talked to Carrie about that. And last year, there was markets in similar situations where like there's a toxic entity, individual or external, that is really holding up change making. So you're not alone, Carrie. It's definitely, it's part of what really brought this program to life, is hearing from markets that are in these situations. Yeah.
So I actually think that this is just a lovely transition conversation to Jimmy telling us a little bit about power dynamics and pulling up that handout that you all had, and just things to consider. And I think as we consider these different power dynamics, it's really important to remember that it isn't written in stone. They're going to differ from market to market. And there's a lot to consider. And I think mostly what this handout is doing is let's consider them. Let's, as Dar said, name them and be aware of them and where that's going to take us. I'm going to hand it over to Jimmy.
I just shared this in the chat as well. This is one of our outputs from last year. It's really just a tool for reflection in considering what your markets might be experiencing. And like in Carrie's case, what she was just describing, right? We have these entrenched vendors who are board members who have been there for years. There's probably some age imbalances going on that might lead to some disrespect if Carrie, in this case, maybe because Carrie is younger. We see this just across the board at markets in Maine of just, for whether it's traditional bigotry, men treating women inappropriately, so sexism there, or, lack of structure is even an imbalance, or a power dynamic. When there are no rules to hold somebody accountable, then they can exploit that opportunity there. I think, as we're moving forward and examining the conflicts that are happening at our markets and just talking about conflicts in general, identifying these power imbalances is super helpful. We don't always have immediate answers or quick fixes for how to address them. in general, and this is something that, you know, Hannah brought up at the beginning of today's session, and it's just a core message we're going to continue to communicate throughout our training and conversations with you all. The transparency aspect is huge. Accountability measures, having processes in place to hold people accountable that are clear, that are in your bylaws or your rules, are really important as well. And yeah, market culture also, you know, like having everybody feel like they have a seat at the table, having agency to change their markets is also super important. So yeah, I hope this is a document that is of value to you, just in for reference and whatnot. Also, you know, we invited you all to a discussion or an overview on the Anti-Racist Farmers Market Toolkit, which is a resource that the Farmers Market Coalition supported in its creation, came out in the wake of incidents surrounding George Floyd in 2020 and Breonna Taylor. And that there's just the work of anti-racism is a lot about addressing power imbalances that exist, that are common at markets across the country. And yeah, that's a great tool that I think we have now linked to it on our resource page, and I'll make sure that it's accessible to you all again. It's a 70+ page document that just contains a lot and really can't be digested in one sitting. But yeah, that's just something we are going to reference continuously as well, because it is just something to keep in mind. You know, the processes we have in place and with our market culture, are we being inviting and inclusive to people that may not speak English in Maine, or yeah, just don't have any representation within the market based on their skin color or whatever culture or ethnicity they may have identify with. So yeah, just calling that out. Hopefully that made some sense. Yeah, no, hand it back to you, Hannah.
Thanks, Jimmy. I think so. Some of this here, you know, it's just bringing some insight in. I think what Carrie is talking about is, you know, she's on kind of the receiving end of this, and it's really important for us as organizers to also make sure that we're not on the dishing out end of this, right? It can be really easy to not see that, right? We can create narratives for ourselves about how Carrie Briggs is just getting in and making a mess of things, right? Right? I mean, I want to just reiterate that, because there's often with the older, so I'm just going to just step in here as my role in being a vendor at markets. Some of my very first farmer meetings, statewide farmer meetings about farmers markets, I was so frustrated by all the curmudgeons. And that's not going to work. And this isn't going to work. And I had a lot of ideas, and I wanted to share them with everybody because that's who I was. And I couldn't believe that everybody was just so much of a naysayer. So we progressed through the years of me doing this, and 20 years later, I sit and I find that I often am a curmudgeon. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, like that's going to work, right? I will say that one of the things that I found most powerful about being a curmudgeon is to remember that if there is these new fun ideas, why not embrace them and also empower those people to be the motivators behind them? Maybe they work and maybe they don't, but bringing people in and having them be part of the action is really priceless. So I'm just gonna say in Portland, the Portland Farmers Market in Maine is a pretty large market. And we're city run for literally 220 something years. And then there was a transition where the farmers decided they wanted to have a little more say and a little more power about the things that were happening at the market. And there was a transition, but the transition was not smooth and it was not 100% supported by the farmers. And so it was a very slow process of getting all the farmers on board. I was deemed a arugula puppy. So that was my name as arugula puppy because I was young, wanted to sell funky things like arugula, and I clearly was a baby. So, okay, that's fine. I can be the arugula puppy. I'm happy to wear that title on the little organizational chart, arugula puppy. But over time, and it took years of hearing and listening to what these people were saying, right? This one older, really very, very grumpy farmer wanted to make sure that there was, there's a parking problem in Portland, always a parking problem. We can never find enough places to put. I'm sure other big markets have the same problem. How do we get enough people able to park? Are they driving around for hours? And this was something they felt was limiting the market dramatically. And they really, really wanted a busing system to bus people in from exterior parking lots. And it was really hard to find the funding to make that happen. And inclusivity wise, I pulled them in and said, okay, here you go. These guys really, these were the arugula puppy labelers. And we worked really hard to create this trial system for this. We created posters, we got people on board. The farmer herself is almost elderly, not quite, dressed up in a bumblebee costume and rode the bus back and forth to encourage people and to make sure people knew it was to the farmer's market. The system itself didn't work at all, but it made them a player. It made that farm included in the Cool Club. It made that farm see how the process of change worked and how we could do it cooperatively and how it didn't need to be a market czar situation where it could be a cooperation. And I think that was really very, very important to bring in that older generation. We had some real challenges with this because there was, as we took over, people thought that these young people from far away were taking over a very good market that was close and they had plenty of farmers in already. Anyway, so that's just kind of thinking about how, if we can just make points of including people and showing them how the process to have a voice is. Like, we're actually doing this to let you personally have more of a voice about what is happening is really critical. Okay, so I'm going a little over. Thank you, Jimmy, for that heads up. And we're going to talk, we're going to go in.
Question, Hannah?
Oh, yeah,
I
go
see
for it.
Sherry raised the hand. Yeah.
It was a quick comment. I'll keep it quick because I know, but I am interested in this topic because I feel like I'm not necessarily curmudgeon, but I feel like I've definitely crossed the line and that I am no longer the younger one and I'm that older person. And to some of what you're sharing, I'm just putting it out there for people to think about because I think we could turn back to it maybe another time, is that there is wisdom that curmudgeons have that I think they're often feeling like isn't honored or heard. And I find myself in that position where it's not that I want to stop enthusiasm, it's that I don't want us to waste time on certain things we've spent so much time learning doesn't work, or we have the wisdom to understand why it's not only that it won't work, maybe it would work, but it's not the right approach. And I feel like there is a culture of, and maybe in American culture we embrace new, but a culture in generations that, like, because they're young and they're savvy, they just know things. And I would love to figure out, how do we strike a balance of, yes, let's make sure we have innovation, savviness, particularly people who know how to use all the social media. And then how do we make sure we don't lose this time honored wisdom and time and earned wisdom and know-how that we have, not just in market spaces, and how do we find the best of both worlds? Because I agree that we want to empower people, but I have, in both the market and other space, I've had at least a couple instances where somebody comes in and my request was like, just go through the motions of how things are done and then we can undo it. But there are people who are like coming in or like, we're going to undo it. And I would love to be able to find a balance, I would say, because I'm all for new approaches and undoing, but not losing some of the traction or wisdom that's gained or institutional knowledge if it's an institution, et cetera.
So I want to just call out and really thank Sherry for bringing that up, because I think this is a huge issue at markets, particularly across our aging states, right? So Vermont and Maine are both really unique in that we have aging farmers and also a huge surge of young farmers coming in. So this is something we're seeing, I think, across the board at many farmers markets. And I'm going to just let Gretchen know I do see your hand up, and I'll call on you here in a second. We're going to just, I think, go a little off our normal schedule here to stay here because I think it's really critical. And Leslie wrote, I think in the chat, I'm terrible. I'm sorry. I am old curmudgeon and trying to do this on
No, you're fine,
So-
Hannah. Yeah, I just had
so-
pointed out.
yeah, you said exactly what I was thinking. Exactly. I saw it exactly. Let's go ahead and go forward with that, Leslie. I love that.
Yeah, so I was just, I mean, in listening to all the different points that you're all making, it's like, it's this inclusivity and voice and choice. So back to the structure piece, like how do you establish processes so that you can hear from people where it's not a conversation that you feel like is going to go on forever, and yet it still is an opportunity to have a conversation and to contribute, right? So, and to understand, like, what are people's skills? Where are people's passion areas? So that you have the newbie folks who are like so excited about social media and ready to take pictures and post for you. And then other people who want nothing to do with it. Well, how, right. So like, where are the places where folks can meet to come to agreement for the benefit of the market?
And how much those things that Jimmy said at the very beginning, connection before correction, come in here, right? If we can acknowledge straight up that the curmudgeons, I'll label them something better, have this body of knowledge, and we have this other very excited to explore group, and they have value in their skills, right? We need the connection between the two and to find this common place to work from. And exactly what Leslie was saying is choice and voice. Gretchen, did you want to add something here?
What Sherry brought up was really fitting with some curmudgeon-y stuff that I'm experiencing, because 5 years ago, I'm the second tenured vendor at the market, at the Dover market. And 5 years ago, we went through this period of being in a real financial shambles, to the point where we were donating or making additional contributions to the market treasury just to be able to make sure that our vendors' checks did not bounce and that we did not have, issues like that going on. And finally, with some really slow change of a new location and a new, encouraging other vendors to participate, we're in a healthier financial spot. But what I see happening is people wanting to spend money out of the treasury that's not budgeted, and votes being taken. Like, I lost a vote this last week. I was the one negative vote to say, hey, we're not authorized to take $50 from the treasury, even though it may look like we have plenty there, because it's not part of the budget. And maybe when we reevaluate our budget this winter in January, we need to allocate X number of funds for all of these different special events that we want to have. But I get nervous because of my experience and the hard work it took to get us to where we currently are, when people just say, oh, well, we can spend $50 or we can spend $400 on advertising, when it's not budgeted and it's not discussed as a group. So I really can relate to Sherry, that whole piece of experiences of those curmudgeon-y people being factored in. And I am struggling, and I'm learning that I just need to back off a little. I need to plant the seed of conflict, hoping that other people will think about it and where I'm coming from, and that they will perhaps it will grow and they will, I don't want the market to be where it was. And, another example is we got a couple of farmers market checks and we had a vendor that's like, oh, well, we can do this with that money. And I'm like, do you even know what the money was reimbursed for? So I had to follow up with Jimmy, figure that out, excuse me, and say, we really can't spend that money because that was working capital out of our treasury. So it's hard to be that voice of conflict. But I feel like sometimes you need to be that voice of conflict to remind people that they can't do things inappropriately.
And I think that what you're talking about, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate the share. I think one of the things to think about, particularly where the money is involved, but really in general, is having a set of guidelines. This is the time that this is the time that we can make changes to the budget. And this is the framework of that is very helpful because in the thinking about who does what on a certain day is the players in the room, right? Do you have an opportunity to have choice? Do you have a opportunity to say what you want? And when is that opportunity? And so we've definitely in the markets I've participated in have really clarified when and where a meeting can happen and why. So we try to keep everything in Portland. We try to keep everything to 4 winter meetings, and those are the first Saturday of every month for the first 4 months. And so I know 2 years from now what day that meeting is going to be. I can make that a priority if I want to make that a priority to have a voice, right? And I know when the budget is approved. And then in creating the budget, yeah, there has to be some wiggle room, right? Because things are going to come up. And so that kind of has to be added into the budget to prevent some of this later on, is to make sure there's, I want to call it a slush fund, but you're working with all these people who are making up your cooperative are all business owners, and all of them have different ways of running their business. And a lot of them are, here's a big check, I'm going to go spend it on this thing I wanted to do, right? Like that's a normal way of thinking in their lives. And you're taking a whole bunch of those people who all make different decisions, different financial decisions for their farm all the time, and putting them together. So how do we agree on, right? This is the idea. We need to make a thing that we all agree on. And it's a little painful sometimes to make that structure. But then once the structure's there, it's the thing to point back to. And that said, I have several times, Gretchen, been the only one voting no on something. But I also feel confident that the structure was followed and that I'm just in the minority. And that's okay. I'm allowed to have my voice. I had my voice. I was also allowed to try to convince my fellow farmers of that thing, but I was unsuccessful. And now I kind of have to suck it up because I also, I'm not saying you should in this situation. I don't know your situation enough, but this is some realization that I've had to come through myself and say, okay, I was voted down. We followed the process that I was part of making. This is where it's going to go. Not everyone isn't always going to agree with me, and that sucks.
And I get the being in the minority. It's developing the structure now that we have money that we can actually spend, so that, like you said, there's a slush fund, there's wiggle room. But I guess I would feel safer from previous experiences doing it very intentionally instead of by the seat of our pants. And that's been the difficult part for me to get across.
Yeah. And maybe I'm not sure about the structure or who fills what role at your market, but that might be the moment that you say, I'd love to volunteer to be the treasurer because this is something that's really important to me. Right. And that's kind of how this has to go for a lot of folks, is if something's really important to you, then that's the thing that you make the priority in where you're willing to volunteer that. Okay, I have gone off, Jimmy.
Yes, I'm gonna interject. The education team has been chatting this privately. Just because we're a little over time, I still think we should go into breakout rooms. We want to group everybody by similar market size and kind of revisit this conversation of market structure. I know some of you looked at those rules charts and we're like, it's me for everything and it sucks in Carrie's case. And I'm sure some of you are like, it's really working well. And we're gonna join you for these breakout rooms for about 10, maybe say 12 minutes, Andrew, give us a little more time. And that's kind of the remainder of the conversation today is really just talking about market rules, assignments, how markets can be better functioning, how conflicts can be averted in the first place or addressed based on transparent, clear market rules. Yeah. Market rules, excuse me, and rules. So go ahead, Andrew, and send us away. And then
yeah, so we're grouping you by large, medium, and small markets, but they aren't clean delineations. So maybe at the beginning in your breakout room, maybe just describe your market a little bit so that everybody has a sense of who's in the room.
And just so we know what to expect, how long are we going to stay in the rooms?
I'm starting a timer for 12 minutes. So at 12 minutes, I will press the button that gives you an extra minute to wrap up. And I'm
if maybe if one person from each room would be willing to speak for a moment about what came up in your room.
I can go if you'd like.
Thank you.
So we discussed kind of one of the things that the Putney market has noticed is potentially if something were to happen to one of our active participating members, one of our important active participating members specifically, and is there a plan in place for someone else to step up and take their position and attempt to fill their shoes? Another thing was like how to create and or change bylaws versus rules. So like rules on for at least for the Putney market only need board member approval, but if you are changing bylaws, there's a very, very long specific list of things that must be done to actually change them, which is why they were left purposely vague in our case.
Thanks, Kirsten. About one of the other rooms?
The large market room featuring Dorset, Waitsfield, and Burlington, all in Vermont, talked mainly about the structure of rules and the enforcement of rules, vendor behavior, creating rules, board member participation in the market in general and in enforcing the rules. And if anyone else from that room wants to talk about specifics, go ahead.
I think for us, really, I really liked between the three of our markets. I'm in Dorset and also in Burlington. We both mentioned, that vendor behavior has been a challenge, and that Waitsfield Market had mentioned that they have so basically some fines. We also have that listed in our policies in Dorset, but getting that enforced is a challenge. Myself as a manager, I don't always agree with the board. I think it's kind of natural as being the person that is forefront in dealing with rule, policy. Basically, when vendors break policies, I'm the one that has to face the brunt of it. But the board isn't always wanting to be the bad guys to enforce it, to charge the fines, and I don't have the authority to do so. So I think hashing that out, getting that more concrete would be a good step.
That's a great concrete thing to be step to be considering, how to figure that one out. Yeah. in the time in between when we meet again. That may be a little bit of homework that you'll get a chance to think about.
Mhm.
Okay.
I
Great.
can I can just say with the medium market group, we had 3 markets there. Each of them have paid market managers with very different stories of, BTLT. Like Julia is able to, across the role chart for the most part, hold all of those roles and responsibilities, it seems like, maybe with some volunteer support. And then in Lewiston, they have a new market manager who that the role chart seems like it's going to be helpful to review with them and figure out who at the market is supporting them in achieving all of the roles that need to be fulfilled. And then in Manchester, there's a market manager that's just tied into a challenging market culture where change and support is hard to leverage. So I think there's like different things to unpack with each of those markets. I don't know if anybody wants to expand upon theirs at all.
I will say that this is the first year that we did the $10 fine implementation for someone that's misbehaving, and it seemed to, because I was like, well, we don't want to fine them significantly, but just the $10 for like not doing your task, just the notion of it got them like, oh right, it just was like a little bit of a wake-up call. I don't even think we implemented it a lot, Miranda, did we? And I also just will say, back to that subject about you don't want to put your market manager in between the board and the vendors. So we do our best to stand behind our market manager. We will write letters. Miranda will say to us something, like we had an issue where we have on one side of our field, there's a yoga studio, and the request of that studio is that we leave. No one can be parked there after 8:30. And, we constantly, people slip back into that every season. And so, I'm sure we wrote a letter and sent it out to those members that were affected. And, we'll save that letter because we'll need to use that again, just as a reminder. But, we're just humans, so people need to be reminded, and the season lags on and people are getting tired. So, but the idea of having the manager in between the board and the vendors frightens me. So I just want to I'm glad it's something we need to all remember, because can't be doing that. So those are my thoughts.
Thanks everybody for all your thinking and supporting each other in these groups today. One of the things I wanted to lift up too, a couple of people talked about that things are really smooth and going well. And sometimes it's because there's a paid position, or sometimes maybe it's just the dynamics of the folks that are there. And if that's true, this is a great opportunity to write down what's happening and capture that culture. If you have good working relationships, don't bet that the players are always going to be there. But there's something about the way you work together that you build this culture. So the next person that gets invited in to fill whoever spot that has to go, this is the way we work together. So it can just help, so that you don't then have to invent it with new personalities. So if it's going well, great opportunity to write things down. So we are just about done for today. This is great work. Thank you to our facilitators. Thank you to everybody for participating. And I think where we're going, Jimmy, you and I, well, I guess I'm going to turn it over to Hannah and Dar. But is there anything else that you're hearing? Just one final question before I turn it over. Is there anything that you've heard from each other, whether it's in this debrief right now or when you were in the small group, that you're really feeling like that's a nugget? I want to make sure I hang on to that piece and think about how I can include that in my market or talk to my board about.
I'm hearing that there is a difference between bylaws and rules. And all we really have are unspoken rules in addition to the bylaws.
So, Gretchen, I think you can find, Jimmy, I think there's some resources on the mffm.org page about roles of the bylaws versus rules. And that does break it down very nicely to have some, like, these things are never going to change and take quite a bit of effort to change when we want to. And then there's some things that really need to be flexible, like the rules often has like what time market is, you know, and some more flexibility and somewhat not easy to change, but somewhat less of a process to change. And so it's nice to have that division for that reason. But there are a lot of different models that can work. Some use guidelines. Dar had some wonderful examples that you guys were sent of some just very in-depth laying out of how a market can function. And those, you know, what's really nice is to kind of take a look at those and say, like, this is the kind that might work for us. And then use that as a little bit of a, not a template, but a place to start, right? And then you kind of wiggle it to meet the needs of your market more, add things in. It's just a place to start thinking about it. And so investigate the ones that Dara put up, investigate the ones I put up. None of them are like the perfect thing to do, but it's a place to start the thought process. And Jimmy is popping a whole bunch of things in the chat here. So I think there's something in there for you guys to grab.
I would like to just say that, I mean, I learned that, I mean, I don't think we have something in our rules that Miranda and I were discussing, you know, but that, you know, it's clear. So when you're signing off in the application, you know, that's your signature is your acceptance of the rules. And I just want to add something about being respectful to your fellow vendors, and, you know, the vendor participation is expected on the day of the market, whether you're assigned a duty or not. If you see the trash overflowing, go over. If you see something trash in front of your booth, you're going to pick it up. I mean, I do, but I mean, if I'm walking around the field, I'm picking up trash if it's there. Just, you know, it's a family. It needs to be, you know, we're all in this together. But I want to add that into the our rules, Miranda. So thanks.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I think we're pretty much wrapping this up. So just a little bits from today. I think Jimmy, did you have a poll that you were going to put out in the chat, or we gonna send that later?
I will put the poll in the chat at the end. Yeah, it's our workshop evaluation, so I'll wait till the very end. Yeah.
Okay, great. And Leslie was just talking about the moving forward part, correct? I'm just a little lost track where we are. Jimmy, are we on the outline where you are?
Yeah, we're just on to next steps and debriefing. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, at this point, if there's more to share, I mean, Leslie or Hannah had a great final prompt of just like what's sticking with you all today. So I don't know if other folks have things they want to share. I saw in the chat that Georgie added, I'd like to discuss market culture with our board. What should we be expecting of vendors, and how can we make those expectations clear and get their buy-in? Thanks for that, Georgie. A lot of behind the scenes work that underlies the market roles, right? And how market day manifests.
A lot of things that I think about in not to push it in vendors' faces, but to definitely make sure it's being considered, is that the health of the market is really critical for the health of our farms participating in that market, right? If the market is an unhealthy market, that does not do anything for the health of my farm itself. And so if I have ways to envision making that market more exciting, making it have a better flow of traffic, setting vendors up in ways that, if you have like major vendors and then smaller, newer vendors, if you can ping pong them throughout the market. So the flow of traffic to the bigger vendors goes by newer vendors. There's a lot of things that we can do to strengthen the market through our roles and through our structure of the setup of market, right? It isn't always the smartest to say the least popular vendors are on the farthest out spot. And the more we think about making the market vibrant, kind of a little less work we have to do to make our own farm vibrant within the market, right? Like those are two separate things, but very, very connected. And so yes, we don't have to do as many of the bells and whistles for sure. If you don't feel like bells and whistling it as a farmer, okay, but then your market doesn't have the bells and whistles. And I think that is really important. Anyway, what other things here do we want to bring in? Any other things that we want to bring into?
I'll just call out Sherry said, would like to continue to talk about strategies around culture that foster cohesion and deter conflict, connected to motivators for people to be their best selves. Feel free, this is great input for us. I mean, the workshop evaluation too is where we get a lot of input, but this year is different than last year in terms of how we're delivering this content and fostering these conversations. So we definitely are we're meeting twice a week outside of this to tailor these sessions for you all. So please let us know. A few things I'm going to follow up with. One is an intake form, and two is a Google group to add you all to for questions like this that Terry just sent out. How do other markets place vendors? Great question. A lot of collective learning and things to share.
I'm just going to, because I can't shut up, point out one more time that the anti-racist toolkit is something that I brought to mind that my markets need to change how we set things up for vendors, because our vendor placement is by accident probably racist. So it's something to think about and to look at. So remember that toolkit's available and look at it, dig deep in it.
I just added the evaluation poll, but that will be in a follow-up email as well.
I also think that the farmers market legal toolkit, which has been referenced a couple times in terms of the legacy binder work that some of the Vermont markets have done, and which has helped them, is another place to look at, because it's really about that whole project, which continues. It really is about helping to create fair, equitable, and transparent structures, and some of that there's some good checklists and ideas in there. And we're always adding on. We just added a new market manager versus independent contractor resource onto that we worked on with the Vermont Law School. And so, look at that as well. That may be another place that find some answers.
Cool. I think the silence means we're ready to depart. Thanks everybody for joining again. And yeah, we're meeting every Wednesday this month up till the holiday week. So.
And please take a moment to fill out that poll that Jimmy sent out there. If you want to grab that link before we close so you can open it in another browser. But those are very, very helpful for us. And we appreciate if you fill them out.
Yeah, we appreciate there's been a lot of great conversations. Been great to hear you all sharing so much, bringing ideas up. So that's what we want to foster, more of that. So keep that going.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Take
Have a good-
care.
Yeah,
good
thank
day.
you.
See y'all. It's us and Bob.
Excellent.
I'm gonna
Good
pause.
session.
Yeah, stopping recording.